question I get asked a lot is, should I make my own alcohol stove or should I just buy one? And like a lot of questions in ultralight backpacking, that depends on a lot of things. So today I'm going to present the advantages and disadvantages of both and see what you think might be best for you. So let's start with stoves you can buy. There are a lot of commercially available alcohol stoves, and one advantage of that is that you don't have to deal with investing in any kind of buying of materials or tools that you might need if you don't have a lot of tools. The time involved is pretty significant. It's about the swipe of a credit card. And you know that you're going to be getting a stove that works. Companies that sell commercially available stoves sell them for a reason, because they work, usually. So I thought I'd show you some designs that I think are good. This one is a Brasslite, and these are really great stoves. They're made out of brass to improve the efficiency of the fuel vaporization and just overall fuel efficiency. They're a little bit heavier than some, but they're very, very well made. The guy who founded this company was actually a jeweler, and it really shows in his workmanship. Things are spot welded very meticulously, and they're kind of like little works of art. Very cool stoves, but a little bit heavier. This one is a white box stove. These are amazing stoves, very hot. Good for wider pots or if you have to boil more water. This is a Minibull Designs stove. Minibull Designs comes out with new stove designs all the time, and that's a site that you want to look for if you're looking to buy one. There's a Trail Designs stove, very, very cool. This goes with the Caldera cone. And there's an Evernew titanium stove. So there's lots of different options. The price range out there is pretty reasonable, but like I said, the main thing is that you know you're getting a stove that's going to work. If you try to build one yourself and you're really not confident in what you're doing, you might end up with something that doesn't work, or worse, explodes in your face. If you want to get the satisfaction of cooking on something that you made yourself and you're slightly more adventurous, then you might want to try to build your own stove. And luckily there's a lot of designs out there that are very simple to make. So here's a Super Cat stove. Here's another version of the Super Cat stove. This is made with just a simple cat food can and a hole punch, really. This is a Pepsi can stove. You might have heard of this if you've done any research. 2 cans of Pepsi and a nail and some aluminum tape, and you're basically done. Requires only basic tools. Here's a penny stove. Might have heard of this too. Again, very simple to make out of a Heineken can. So there's lots of options for, even beginner level DIY stoves. And so what I want to do now is kind of go through some of the tools that you might need to make your own stove. If you're just starting out and you don't have a lot of tools, there's still plenty of stoves you can make. However, I just want to show you some specialty tools that you might want to get if you plan on making something a little bit more complex. Even if you don't have your own workbench, tool shed, or extensive toolkit, you might be surprised to find that you can probably make many alcohol stoves with things you have lying around your house already. So, for example, just to make a standard Pepsi stove like this, all you really need is a few beer cans and things like scissors to cut the cans in half and make the inner ring, and awl to punch holes for the jets. Or if you wanted, you could use push pins like these to make the punch holes for the jets. If you want to make a side burner, something like a Super Cat stove, usually you can get away with a common hole punch like this. So you might have one of these already. For things like scoring out bigger holes, you can get away with an X-Acto knife, kind of like this. You probably have one of these laying around somewhere when you want to cut out the bottom of a pop can or a beer can to make a Pepsi style stove. So there's lots of things that you probably have laying around already that you could make a simple design with. Let's look at some specialty tools that you might need if you want to make a little bit more complex design. I've got a bunch of tools here that you might find useful if you want to take it to the next level. And let's just go through them. The first one is what's called a Whitney style punch. And this is a metal punch that comes with a bunch of different punch sizes. And this is really good for making really clean holes in side burner stoves with bigger jets, kind of like the Super Cat stoves. So this just really punches through metal very cleanly. You don't have to worry about rough ends from a drill or something like that. So These are pretty cheap actually. You can get a knockoff for about 15 bucks or so. So if you plan on making a lot of stoves, this is actually a really good tool and it's worth the investment. Another one I like a lot is a pipe cutter. And this is useful if you have to cut really wide tubular kind of aluminum, something like this aluminum beer bottle that I use to make this stove. So you can really cut wider pieces with that and get a nice, good, clean cut. May not be for everyone, it's only if you want to make certain types of stoves, but it's worth noting. Another one is a good pair of tin snips. Now I showed you before that you can get away with scissors in a lot of cases, but sometimes if you're cutting a little bit thicker material, you might want tin snips. So these are pretty cheap too. You can buy them at Big Lots or something like that for not much money. I mentioned before hole punches too, but there's some specialty ones out there. If you go to an art supply store, you'll see this one here is 1/16 of an inch. That's a lot smaller than most cheapo hole punches that you get Office Depot or something. This one's 3/16 of an inch, so that's a little bit smaller than your standard office size hole punch too. So you can get a variety of these in a lot of different, not only sizes, but also shapes. They make square ones and ones that are shaped like stars. So if you really get into this, you start to think about, oh, you know, what if I made a stove with star-shaped jets instead of round? So there's a lot of stuff you can play around with there. Yeah, that might be a little bit too extreme, but I have a bunch of those, and I like to play around with those. Another one is a Dremel style tool. Now, this isn't a Dremel, it's a cheap knockoff, but if you get one of these with a good kit with a bunch of cutting wheels and sanding wheels and grinding wheels, this can be really valuable too. So a lot of times, you know, you might cut out something like a hole in the middle of a stove and the edges are kind of sharp. You might want to sand that down, and it's just easier to do with a Dremel tool. So that's a pretty useful thing to have. It does a lot of different things. So here's a not a pipe cutter. It's a hole punch kit. So a lot of times you want to punch a hole out of the bottom of a can or out of the top of this lid, like on this Sargent Rock Ion stove here. And I like to have a nice, perfectly round circle with smooth edges. And it's really hard to do if you want to score something, you know, with a X-Acto knife. You just really can't get the edges right. You're never going to get it perfectly round. But if you use something like this, then it's going to cut out a perfect hole every time, and you don't have to worry about rough edges. So again, this is a pretty specific application only for certain types of stoves, but it's pretty nice if you plan to build a lot of different designs and experiment a little bit. And of course, don't forget a good drill.